listeners. Welcome to episode 9 of Plano's Political Pitbull podcast. I am Esther.
And I'm Ruth.
And today we are going to talk about national issues. Before I get started, I forgot last week to tell you all where I got my dollar amount for my property tax bill that I would be paying. There's a tax calculator, and you go to this website, mytaxdollar.plano.gov, and you type in your information, your numbers, and it spits out how much you will be paying. So go there and check it out, and you can see what your bill would be if the tax rate didn't change. And then maybe when they actually send out the number, we can see what the tax bill will be. So, up first, we have Medicare cutting payments to doctors. The Fed wants to cut Medicare payments to doctors or providers, as they call them, again. If they go through with another cut in pay, doctors will be forced to stop taking Medicare. The cut would be a 2.8% base rate decrease. Now, interestingly, since 2001, there has been a 29% drop in payment fees to doctors. And with the rise of inflation and the cost of doing business, the doctors are saying that if this goes through, they're just going to stop taking Medicare. Because at this point, they would be doing it for free. So, and they can't afford it because they still got to pay the bills. What a lot of people don't understand about Medicare is while you pay into it over your years of working, and you still pay into it even when you're a senior, the money, the payment that goes to the doctor barely covers expenses. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah, become a doctor. You'll get paid so much. Yeah, if you're a plastic surgeon or a heart surgeon, if you're a surgeon, sure, but if you're anything else,
maybe if you're just a surgeon, like a plastic surgeon, because that's cash pay.
Well, yeah, that's why they make bank.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of this. So anesthesia. Okay, a patient goes in and they need anesthesia. Medicare pays about $12 for 15 minutes of anesthesia. Now, just so you know the comparison, a doctor will charge anywhere from $250 to $300 for 15 minutes. So they're only giving you 12. Okay? This is a total loss. You can't pay anybody that amount of money to do that work. It's not an easy thing. The anesthesiologist is basically the person keeping the patient alive. And if something goes wrong, it's the anesthesiologist that will actually be doing the CPR and to revive the patient. So they cannot do a procedure for $12. If you're doing cataracts on a 70-year-old, and those are usually pretty fast, any good doctor could do that in 15 minutes. The anesthesiologist basically loses money. I'd say, it's a charity day today. Unfortunately, they can't write that off as charity. They have overhead. Doctors have overhead. They have to pay a staff. They have to pay rent.
They have to pay for equipment.
The
medication in itself is expensive.
Exactly. You're not even paying for the medication. You're paying less for the medication. I'll never forget the story that I heard. A doctor, an anesthesiologist, was working in a very poor community hospital. All right. And a lot of these patients were on Medicaid. Now, Medicaid is even worse than Medicare in payments. And he was doing delivering babies. So he was giving epidurals. Now, Medicaid paid $40 for the epidural. That was everything. That was $40 for the actual epidural kit with the needle and the medicine and everything in it, and the doctor. There's just one problem with that. The kit was $80. So the hospital was losing money. And guess what? When cuts came, that hospital closed, which is not a surprise because they were getting paid nothing. They were not even breaking even on their costs. A lot of people have this misconception that doctors are wealthy, doctors are rich, doctors can afford it.
It's because all the procedures and stuff, everything to see a doctor is so expensive, and people assume that money goes to the doctors. No, most of it does not go to the doctors.
No, and to even file those claims to Medicare, you've got to jump through a bunch of red tape. You need a person actually doing that. I've often said that the reason why our medical care is so expensive is because of the amount. Excuse me.
You okay?
Yes, of the amount of people it takes to work through insurance claims, Medicare, Medicaid, red tape. So if these cuts go through again, be prepared for doctors to say, that's it. It's not worth it. I can't do this anymore. I'm no longer going to be taking Medicare, which means that people will lose their doctors. And at this point in time,
I blame doctors being greedy.
At this point in time, it is hard enough to get to see a doctor who takes Medicare. Ask anyone over the age of 65. They have a hard time finding a new doctor who takes Medicare. It's just the way it is. And it's because, for some reason, the government seems to think that, well, we'll just cut the payments to the doctors. Well, eventually...
They don't need that money.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, but...
everyone thinks, like, oh, doctors are so rich. Not really anymore. Maybe at one point, sure, but with government meddling, insurance companies and all that, it's not that way anymore.
No. And to think about it, that doctor has to take the time to see that patient. That's money that is basically lost. That's time that's lost, because while they're seeing a Medicare patient or a Medicaid patient who basically they're getting not even breaking even, they could have been seeing somebody who was paying cash or had a very good insurance plan that paid a fair price. Doctors don't necessarily want to be paid more than their time is worth. They want a fair market price. Unfortunately, with insurance, and Medicare and Medicaid, that has been distorted. A fair market price now is very distorted. But we rely on these things now, and they have distorted the marketplace.
And now getting Medicare is too expensive.
Mm-hmm. And so if you would like to keep your doctor and you are on Medicare, I suggest you contact your congressional person and you write to them and you say, no more cuts to Medicare payments for your doctor. It's very simple. And maybe they'll listen. And maybe they'll wise up. Alrighty, on to the next topic. Minimum wage increases. Now here we have the flip side, where government is wanting to pay less, but they're forcing business people to pay more.
That's how it goes, you know.
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Type of thing. So, California in April had a minimum wage increase.
And they lost a ton of businesses.
Mm-hmm. Well, the minimum wage increase was $20 an hour. $20 an hour for a fast food restaurant worker. Now, I'm sorry. Y'all do a great job. But I don't think that serving, go working a cash register at McDonald's or sweeping a floor at McDonald's is worth $20 an hour.
Teachers at daycare don't even get paid that much.
Wow. Wow.
And they're having to deal with, 10 babies or 18 4-year-olds all day.
Boy.
That's a lot harder.
I would say that is
I would say.
That is a lot harder.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I know customer service is a nightmare.
Yes.
But
we've seen some horror stories.
Still, they don't even get paid near close to that. $20 an hour.
Yep. Well, you have to remember it is California. So California does cost
True.
more to live in California.
True.
But have no fear. I have a feeling that this will spread like most bad ideas do. So the new wage went in effect in April. And since then, 10,000 jobs were lost. And the business owners say, hey, it's because of them. I couldn't afford $20 an hour for somebody to flip burgers or tacos. Speaking of tacos, a very good taco chain closed 48 locations in the state of California as of June due to the minimum wage hike. 70% of restaurants had to cut staff or consolidate positions. Pizza Hut cut 1,200 jobs, and I've never heard of this place. It's probably good. I don't know. Excalibur Pizza. They cut 73 delivery driver jobs, and they are transitioning to third-party companies like Uber Eats, DoorDash, things of that nature. So at least maybe those guys can just convert to those things, I guess. But they don't really, it's not a necessity anymore to have a delivery driver. If you do have these apps now, of course, now the customer is paying that fee for the driver directly to them, I guess, not to the store. But I have a feeling the store is not they can't afford to cut their pizza costs because everything's going up now. Mm-hmm. So now you're going to be paying more for your pizza to be delivered.
Yeah, that's the irony about raising the minimum wage, because then what you're paying for as a because what you're paying for then as the consumer, because remember, employees are also consumers, raises as well. So your situation doesn't really change much.
No, we see this every time somebody raises the minimum wage. Either they cut, employees get cut, employees lose their jobs, their hours get cut, and or prices go up.
Or as we saw with a couple of businesses in California, they got shut down.
Yeah.
They couldn't keep up because of the strain of, first off, the strain of COVID. Second off, the economy in California right now, like they weren't really doing that well to begin with. And then you add this on with having to raise the wages, can't keep up.
No, and I don't know why politicians don't learn. They just do not learn. No matter how many times they do this, they get the same result.
I mean, poor Arby's.
Yes,
I was so sad when I saw that.
The original Arby's location, the very first Arby's, closed.
Well, no, it wasn't I don't think it was the first, but it was one of the most famous because it had a perfect view of the Hollywood sign, and it was a prime filming spot.
Oh, yes.
On the LA Hollywood Strip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if that was the first actual store.
I remember I looked it up and it was not the first. But it was a very prominent location.
Yeah.
For 50 years.
Right. And didn't their rent also go up too?
Yeah, they were having problems before that. COVID hit them hard because California was completely shut down for a good long while, longer than any other state, I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
It was one of the longest anyway.
And rent was high. Like, the economy in California is ridiculous as it is, for anyone, especially for businesses. And so the owner, she couldn't keep up anymore. This was like the last nail in the coffin.
Right. So with the rent increase and then the minimum wage increasing.
And I think she also said she was having trouble with she had to get new equipment. Like there was like equipment she couldn't afford that she was required to have.
Yeah.
So there might have been new regulations or something.
Well, it was, I think it was the, I can't remember if it was California or if it was the Arby's itself, the parent company had said, you need new something, new equipment or something, and the franchisee has to pay for that. And so she couldn't afford that either. And then this was just this latest thing we're having to pay $20 an hour. It was the nail in the coffin. So now that store is closed. And I don't know if she's retiring, or I think she's retiring.
Yeah, that's the thing that also people don't understand about fast food chains is the franchisees. Because, yes, Arby's as a company is fine. They have a ton of other stores, but the individual places, the individual stores themselves suffer because they're paying for it. It's kind of like a separate entity in a way.
Right. So,
in terms of finances.
Mm-hmm. So with franchises, Arby's will, it depends on their agreement, but a lot of times what you have is the franchisee goes in and says, I want to be a franchisee, and the store, let's say Arby's, builds her a store. So it looks exactly the same as all the other Arby's. And now she has a well-named brand, but
it's her store.
It's her store. She buys the ingredients from Arby's, I believe. Everyone's a little bit different, but most of the time you have to buy the ingredients from the parent company so that it's all standardized, so that if you go to one Arby's, it's going to taste the same as if you go to another Arby's or another fast food place. Same thing with McDonald's. And they pay a fee to the owners of Arby's. But everything she makes after that is hers, or is the franchisees. And they're all basically locally run by the person who owns the franchise.
It's almost like your regular small business, except it's under a big brand name.
Yeah, right. But they do the hiring, they do the firing, they do the day-to-day management. You know, the umbrella company does not have a lot of say in the day-to-day running.
They do get a cut of the profits, though.
It depends on the deal. Some will pay a fee, some will get a percentage. There's all different kinds of models. I don't know what Arby's does specifically, but that's just how it works. So you're not hurting Arby's, the parent company.
You're hurting the individual store owner.
Yeah, who is a small business owner. Because Arby's will have another person open up another Arby's
somewhere else
in a state that maybe has a lower minimum wage. So for them, they can it might balance out. But for this woman, that's it. She's done. She's over.
Yeah, I mean, like, in California, you might be having fast food restaurants closing left and right, but it doesn't really hurt the parent company because then they're opening several other stores in several other states. So they're fine.
Yeah, could be. But we digress. I don't understand why they just don't, politicians just don't learn. They tried this in Seattle. They raised the minimum wage to that magic number of $15 an hour in Seattle. Everyone was like, oh yes, $15 an hour. The world will be perfect. Everything will be happy-go-lucky. There will be no more poor people if we just have a minimum wage of $15 an hour. Well, guess what? It didn't work. Because what happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. People now went making $15 an hour, and they got pushed off, or they were going to lose their Medicaid and their food stamp benefits. And maybe they didn't need the food stamps anymore, but they weren't getting medical care, because minimum wage jobs usually don't pay for, I should say, medical insurance. So they were going to get kicked off their Medicare. So people went to their bosses and went, listen, I'm going to get kicked off from my Medicaid. I'm going to get kicked off Medicaid and my public assistance. I need you to lower my hours so that I can still qualify for these things.
Because because if they don't have it, even the amount they're making that gets them kicked off is still not enough to live on?
So it depends. I think $15 an hour, I believe, is $35,000 a year. And depending on where you live, you could live very well on that, or you could live very poorly on that. But the thing that kicked them off, that they were going to lose, that I would imagine you would really want to keep, is your insurance. Because as we see, it's very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's more expensive now than when it was before Obamacare kicked in. And I can't blame them for not wanting to get rid of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is horrible insurance.
But it's insurance.
But it's insurance. And as bad as it is, it's still better than nothing. So they'll take that. And in order to qualify, you're only making a certain amount of money, which is a flaw in the system, I guess. And so they were going to get kicked off.
To answer your question earlier of like, why don't politicians learn? This is also, I think you could also add, why don't people learn? Because also people advocate for their politicians to be for the minimum wage increases and all that. I think people still want to have that like Marxist utopia idea of everyone is well off and no one is poor. You know, that idealized fantasy world that unfortunately can't exist, because you're always going to have poorer people and you're always going to have wealthier people. The thing of how America was supposed to work, though, is that you can climb the ladder. Before America, was it possible? You know, you had like the caste system and all that. But America was supposed to work in that you could climb the ladder.
Wait, caste system or class system?
Caste system, right? Like you had like...
So the caste system is in India.
Oh, okay. Then I'm thinking class system.
Or what they called I think they were called the feudal system. It was in England, where you had your titles and your lords and the peasants.
Am I thinking feudal? I think that's what I'm thinking. I think that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking the feudal system.
Yes.
Where you had your different classes. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where you stayed.
And you stayed.
Your family just stayed there throughout the generations. You couldn't climb up it.
No.
Unless there was some miracle. Unless you married into it or something.
And even then, you were very rare to marry into it. Yeah, if you were born into peasant, you stayed there. That was it. There was no going from peasant to the worker class, the merchant class, let's say, or up to the nobility. You didn't go up and down. You stayed there. That was it. Your destiny was pretty much mapped out for you.
Yeah, but like that American dream that everyone always talks about, you know, the whole point of it is that you can climb that social ladder. You can come from a very poor family and suddenly work your way up to being incredibly wealthy.
And we've heard of a lot of people who have done it.
Yeah, there's so many stories of that, of people who have achieved that American dream. Unfortunately, it's much harder nowadays, and so people have kind of become disillusioned to it, and you don't really hear about the American dream as much, so people think it's dead. But I believe that's because of government meddling.
Most likely. It's a factor. Definitely a factor.
But trying to push people out of that poor... They're trying to like push people out of being poor, right? You know, lift people up, that whole equity thing, you know? But it doesn't work because that's just not... Because you're always going to have someone who's wealthier than you.
Yes, you will always have somebody who's wealthier than you, just like they always say, there's always going to be somebody smarter than you, there's always going to be somebody prettier than you. So this is just a part of life. And trying to raise people up is not from, let's say, the working class or poor. There's all sorts of reasons why people are in the financial situation they're in. And a one-size-fits-all is not going to work, like raising the minimum wage.
Because as we've seen, it doesn't work for economic reasons, in that you raise the minimum wage, prices go up or people get laid off, and the working class is worse off anyway.
Back to where they were before.
You didn't improve their lives at all.
No.
In some cases, you made it worse.
Interestingly enough, some of the most prosperous countries have no minimum wage. Some of the favorite countries of the people who advocate for the minimum wage don't have one.
You're talking about the Nordic countries?
Yep. Sweden
does
not have a minimum wage.
They have a competitive wage system, right?
Yes, they have. They do not have a minimum wage, but believe it or not, most people make higher than the average minimum wage in countries that have one. So
because the wages are competitive, so they want to bring in workers. Yeah. And if a place has a better pay than another place, obviously workers are going to flock to that establishment with the better pay.
Yes. Nobody, and I don't think there's anyone in that country who makes a quote minimum wage that we would think of. The average, they make higher than that. So they do very well.
They also have we also have to remember, with all the things that those Nordic countries do that everyone always raves about, they do have a lower population.
Yes, they do.
Significant lower population.
But whether I don't think that has anything to do with the fact that they do not need a minimum wage to get good pay. The government does not need to force a business to pay somebody a certain amount that the government picks out of the air and force them to pay these folks that amount. They do very well on their own. And I really wish, they want to take so many things and so many ideas from these countries, but the thing that actually works well, they don't want. It boggles my mind.
Because they only want the aspects that have control. We're in on it.
Oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. That is an interesting way of looking at it. That they only want the aspects that give government more control. That's a good way to look at it.
And more money, because these countries are also taxed to death.
Well, yes, in Sweden, they're what we would call our middle class. They get taxed at 40%. And whereas that's the amount that the wealthy would be taxed.
No, the wealthy get taxed more. It's like 60%.
No. What I'm saying is their middle class, let's take Sweden for example, their middle class, their income tax is 40%. Okay? That's the, here, the middle class pays nowhere near 40%. Okay?
No, yeah, I got that.
Okay.
It's just you were saying that amount of 40% is what the wealthy would pay. But no, it's actually higher. Here.
Well, it could be higher now.
I believe the last time I looked, it was around 60% or higher that the wealthy pay.
Just an income tax? I don't know. Not on income tax. Not on federal income tax. I'm just talking income tax now. I don't mean, if you add state, if you have a state income tax, and then and then your sales tax and your property taxes, yeah. I mean, people in New York be paying 60%.
No, I don't think it was that specific.
Okay, yeah, no. So yeah, I was just talking federal income tax. So, well, if we did that, the middle class would be furious for paying 40% in taxes.
Well, they're talking about, middle class is already kind of pissed off at the amount they're taxed right now. They want our politicians for the upcoming general election are running on lowering the middle class's federal taxes, or keeping it, or not raising it, or simply not raising it.
Well, everybody during election year, whichever side you're on, is always saying, "Well, we're gonna lower the middle class taxes," and I don't usually see a lowering of taxes that often. It does happen. It's happened a few times in my lifetime, but not on a regular basis, and it always depends on who's in office. But we won't get into that because we're nonpartisan here.
Well, my point was that middle class doesn't like to be taxed a lot.
Nobody wants to be. Nobody likes to be taxed.
Sweden doesn't seem to have a problem with it.
I'm sure those folks would like to pay less too. I don't know anyone who says, please tax me more. Please, I would want to pay more. No. Actually, that's not true. I'm remembering now when President Trump said he was going to lower taxes on folks across the board. There were people who were saying, well, I don't need that. And so somebody said, well, if you'd like to pay more, you can. Surprisingly, those same people did not actually pay the IRS more. You can actually, if you want to, if you think you should be paying more, you can donate right to the Department of Treasury, because that's where the tax dollars go. It goes right to the Department of Treasury, and you can do that.
You could also donate to charities, but okay.
Yes, but whenever somebody wants to have a tax decrease, that's what they always say. Well, why should I pay? A lot of people go, well, go ahead. What's stopping you? Unless if you want to, go ahead. I think George W. Bush did that. He said, if you want to pay more, contact the IRS. They will gladly take your money. Surprisingly, nobody did.
Oh, I'm sure at least one person did.
Maybe one. I didn't hear about them, but it's always possible. But nevertheless, here we are again.
We don't learn. Humanity never learns.
No. Yep. No, they don't. They just want to stick to their guns, and no matter how many facts and figures you tell,
It'll work this time.
Yeah. Like, we haven't seen this before.
Oh, they didn't do it right.
No, apparently California didn't do it right either this time.
I'm just saying all the catchphrases I've heard that people say whenever we're like, it didn't work. They want to do something that's already failed, and no, it's like, oh, they didn't do it right. I go, okay, what are you gonna do differently?
Apparently, in California's case, nothing. Alrighty, well, that is going to be it for us for this week. Our pit bull of the week is Angel again. Yeah, Angel is still available for adoption.
Poor Angel, come on, adopt him.
Angel is a her.
Her. Adopt her.
Angel is a smart and friendly dog. She loves to go on walks and wears her famous sunglasses that she loves so much. She is at the Plano Animal Shelter. Please go to our website and click on and click on Pit Bulls Up for Adoption to find out more about Angel. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode. It does help us out. I am Esther.
And I'm Ruth.
For Plano's Political Pit Bull, signing off.